What's up, everybody? Well, that is it. It is officially over. I've completed the Colorado BDR. So let's talk about today, day 5 technically. It's pretty, the short of it is today was the hardest day I've had on a motorcycle, period. It was only, the dirt was probably only 70 miles total, but it was tough. Well, let me back that up. The uphills, totally fine. The downhills were tough. So we went, again, we're doing it backwards. I think, honestly, this section, it would be better to do it the traditional route. Let's start with the last section we did today, because it would be if you're doing it the traditional way, it'd be the first pass you do, which is Ophir Pass, or Ophir, whatever you want to call it, Ophir Pass. And there's just this scree field that is steep and loose. The short of it is we were going down it, and I've heard a lot of people say, like, if you're going down it, it's super hard, like, don't even try, it's not worth it. Well, we went down it today because we were going the other way. We were going from Lake City to Telluride, and it's just these big, light, loose rocks, and then just a sheer drop off on your left hand side, like just a sheer drop off. I think if you're cruising through the woods and like you hit this kind of section, it would be rough, but you'd kind of have bailout points, right? So it's like if you got too wild or too fast, you could bail out. But there's like, you have to stay tight, at least for me, like I had to stay tight to my right side and tight to the mountainside, because if I made a mistake, then I had room to my left, and then I just went in straight in the mountainside. I ended up, second of all, I'm selling the Tiger officially. The primary reason, there's just no engine braking. There's zero engine braking, which is amazing on the road and creates for a really great experience on the road, but is awful downhill because you have no engine brake. The engine braking in first gear doesn't kick in until like 16, sometimes 16 to like 20 miles an hour. When you're going down a steep, rocky, loose mountain pass, you ain't gonna go 20 miles an hour. I'm definitely not. And so you need that engine braking. On Ophir Pass going down, it was so bad that I basically turned the bike off, and I actually just used the clutch as my brake and kind of found this sweet spot in the clutch that kept me at like 7 miles an hour, roughly 6 to 7 miles an hour through that. And then I kind of just kept my feet down to kind of like essentially kind of walk through this scree field because it was so bad. And it is probably 2.5 miles, I would guess. Like, it's pretty far. It's rough. Going up it, if you go the traditional way, you can stay on the right on the wall. And going up loose stuff like that, like, you can kind of keep your speed, and you can work the power to get you through all that stuff. But going down, when you're trying to maintain, like, reduce speed instead of create speed, so you're trying to minimize speed, it's just so much harder. It was rough. Okay, so then let's go back to the other side. Climbing up Cinnamon Pass, we climbed up Cinnamon Pass. Cinnamon Pass was, so I ended up dropping the bike 4 times today. Haven't dropped the Tiger ever. Today I dropped the bike 4 times. First time we were climbing up Cinnamon. The climbs today for me were fine. Had no problem getting up the passes. And it was just a tight corner. It was really rocky in the middle. I didn't go far enough. Stalled the bike. Went to put my foot down. Nowhere to put my foot down and the weight of the bike, so it kind of just laid over. Not a big problem. Got it unstuck there, climbed up. The second time we got to, also on the backside of Cinnamon, again, so like going down, it's a bunch of loose rocks, but there's a couple tracks because there's so many ATVs that come through there that you can, climbing, you could just follow those tracks and go straight up. Going down, you can go down the tracks too, but again, it's steep, so again, maintaining your speed, that sort of stuff. I feel like the other side would be easier to get through and get down, because like going down like technical rocks where they're embedded in the ground, not a problem, easy. It is the super loose rock and steep downhill that is just treacherous. Like, I mean, it's just sketchy. So yeah, going, so then got to the top of Cinnamon. When I dropped the bike the second time, I was going down. There's 2 tracks. There's this guy Mike in front of me. He's on the right. He was stopped in one of the tracks. So again, probably just as much, probably more my fault than his. But I coming down, and then he decided to pull out, and he decided to pull into the other track, and I'm in the one next to it. And so he kind of pushed me off. And again, it's just like super deep, loose rock. And so like the bike went sideways because I tried to stop, got into it, locked the rear tire up, the bike died, and then the bike just fell over. So that one, kind of my fault, not really. I should take the blame for it. I should have like honked my horn or something, just let him know I was coming, because he had no idea, right? He had no idea I was coming. Then we get down that pass, and actually right before that, we actually had another guy, Don, go down really hard in that loose rock. He wrecked, kind of like rode the mountain on his face. He had to sit there for a while, and so Chip, our sweep, and a couple other guys like helped him. So like I continued down. We got pretty much almost all the way down to Animas Forks, and the rest of that downhill wasn't so bad. Again, it was like some big like technical, but like rocks in the ground, so it wasn't bad. And then we got like most of the way down, almost to Animas Forks, which is this old mining town, and there Don pulled up and he blacked out on the bike. And luckily we were like checking to see how he was doing. We ended up having to catch him and hold him. Bit of a scary moment. So we ended up spending some time in Animas Forks because we had to figure out how we were going to get Don out, because like he just shouldn't be riding. But there's a cutoff right there that you can go around. So which is good to know, because if you're going to do the Colorado BDR, honestly, all of it is super easy except for this section. The San Juan mountain section is just tough. So if you wanted to skip Cinnamon Pass, which I'll get to, and Hurricane Pass, you could come up and take this bypass and then just do Cinnamon, and then take Cinnamon into Lake City. Which Cinnamon is tough, and it's a little harder than Hagerman, but I feel like it was doable. It's totally doable. So we get to Animas Forks. We figure Don actually feels okay enough to ride the bike out, so he takes the bypass down into Ouray. And then we continue up Hurricane. Again, getting to the top of Hurricane, super easy. On the way down of Hurricane, I dropped the bike the 3rd time. So when you're on the top of Hurricane, I mean, it's pretty much just a peak, and you're at the top. There's not a lot of room, and it's a steep, sharp left to go down and so I was turning left, and then again, like the bike, it stalled out on me. The rear wheel locked up, and it just slid. And once, because it locked the rear tire, no traction on the rear, and just dropped the bike. So we picked it up, continued down. That was steep, but it wasn't so bad. Just took it slow, steep, but it was okay. I managed it okay. Then we climbed up Corkscrew, and either way you go on Corkscrew, it is going to be steep. Now the traditional way, going south to north, the down will be a lot shorter, because you're not dropping all the way down into the valley floor. You're just dropping between Corkscrew Pass and Hurricane, so you're just dropping a couple thousand feet and then you're up again. So I think, again, much easier to manage that downhill if you go the traditional way. So climbed up Cinnamon, again, no problem, Corkscrew getting up there, but Corkscrew was terrifying. Like, that's the only way to put it, because it was impossible for me to maintain like that 7 to 8 miles an hour, just keeping the bike under control and working it through. It's not that Corkscrew is technical and it was super loose and rocky, it was just very, very steep for a long time. Now again, I prefer going up, so that would be a fun ride, getting to the top, and then you'd have a shorter downhill. So going there, and that climb up would be fun. It actually would be bad. It wouldn't be bad. It's kind of like grippy sand, like sandpaper style, like sand, not deep, so it's like hard dirt, but it's like grippy. So that'd be a fun climb up. But going down it was just miserable. The Tiger has 0 engine braking, and it was just awful to maintain on those steep downhills. The rest of the ride, also quick caveat, we have two GS 1250s with us. Both those bikes had no problems. Both those guys like handled everything without a problem. They just cruise just fine, no problem at all. Me on the Tiger 900 Rally Pro, I think there's a couple things. When you're on the steep downhill, the more road-oriented geometry shows on this bike. The steering's really twitchy. In the steep downhills on uphill and on kind of like flatter dirt, the bike rips. It is so much fun. But if you want to do any of these mountain passes, for me, like just having zero engine braking until 20 miles an hour, like there's no way you're going to come into any of those curves in Cinnamon going 20 miles an hour and having it and stop and be able to control the traction without sliding out and wrecking. Like you have to be able to maintain a speed limit like under 10 miles an hour to get down there. And it was just really, really hard. I had one moment where I kind of like skidded out, got the bike under control, and just kind of had to stop and take my breath for a moment. But all in all, I did it. Fourth time. So you're probably also wondering why I dropped the bike fourth time. So the fourth time I dropped the bike, we then, after coming after Cinnamon, we stopped for lunch, and then we continued over to Ophir. And going up Ophir, again, no problem at all. And if you're going south to north, easier to get through that scree field, and then the down, it's no problem. Like Ophir's not that tough. A lot of embedded rock in the trail, but no sand, so you'll have plenty of grip. Just maintain your speed, be super easy to get down. And very challenging to get up, don't get me wrong, like it will be tough, but you can just hang to your left and you can pick your way up. Wouldn't be as bad. Going down the scree field, awful. I wouldn't recommend it. So if you're gonna do it the opposite way, honestly, I would skip over. If it were me, I would do the bypass. I might go around, like might go down. I try to find a bypass because it just sucks. But so coming right off the top of Ophir, I'm like, I'm gonna crush it this time. I'm gonna do really good. And hit a rock, flipped the throttle, and I was like, up the freaking side of the mountain, laid the bike on its side, but the crash bars did its thing. And so we did it. So that is it. Hardest day on a bike I've had. If you've made it this far, subscribe, leave a comment below. Have you done any of these passes? What are your thoughts? What are your thoughts on the engine braking on the Tiger 900 Pro? Do you have that bike? Does it engine brake? I'm selling it. I'm getting something that actually has better geometry and better engine braking. Selling it. So if you're interested in Tiger 900 Rally Pro Oregon Edition, hit me up. I'll sell you mine. But with that, until next time, stay safe out there. All right, let's get into the route description and kind of overview of what is considered the queen stage of the Colorado BDR. If you don't know what a queen stage is in cycling or in like bike racing, the queen stage is generally like in the tour, it's one of the stages that's the hardest. It's going to kind of determine the race. And I think section 2 of the Colorado BDR is a bit of the queen stage. It's the hardest day, and I don't want to just show you the hardest sections. A lot of other BDR videos show you just like the gnarliest routes, which is super cool because it's like, hey, look at me, I'm riding these really gnarly sections. But they don't give you really any insights into the entire track. And so this section is a little bit long. If you're interested in understanding what section 2 is like, basically going from Telluride to Lake City. Now keep in mind, we actually went south or north to south, so we did the BDR backwards. So if you're doing it the traditional way, south to north, everything you watch here will just essentially be in reverse. We will touch on that because there's definitely some differences as we get through the video in like all the different sections of section 2. But we ran it from Lake City to Telluride, and it was the hardest day. And I also want to have a caveat. So again, getting a little long-winded here, and this is going to be a longer video because of just how much content I wanted to include in the route description, so you really get a complete picture of the entire route. Now that I've had like essentially a week to review the footage, and I've been working on this and going back through and looking at it, don't be discouraged by my initial day takeaway. I wanted to keep that on there because it was just honest, right? It was like the end of the day, I was blasted. And it was hard. I dropped the bike 4 times. It was a very serious workout. However, I want to say that there are a couple of things. One, It was really only the downhills that were tough. So if you're good at riding your bike downhill in loose, steep, with imminent death off to one side, you're fine. I mean, that's the short of it. Like, if you're okay with that, you're good. If you think that steep downhills that are loose are not your forte, you want to practice that before you do section 2 of the Colorado BDR. There are some bypasses you can take to go around some of this stuff, but with that being said, I think you should do it. I know I did mention that I don't think Ophir Pass is worth it. If you're going the other way, I think it's totally worth it. I think it would be easier to go up than down. Although I did have a guy in my comments the other day mention he felt it was easier to go down than up. I think it's easier to go up. In all the loose stuff I had in the steep ups, I had no problems. So it was really just the steep loose downs that I had a problem in. So we're going to get into that. I think it's definitely worth it. The San Juan Mountains are probably the greatest mountain range in the lower 48. Change my mind about that if you want. I mean, growing up in Colorado and living here, still, like, every time I go to the San Juans, I'm like, it just seems like a painting. It's just the most incredible mountain range. The landscape is just, it's incredible. And so I think just for that fact alone, to be able to get back to some of these spots on the Alpine Loop, it is absolutely worth it if you've never been there, and you should do it. And hopefully this long description of this section will help you to prepare and be ready for some of the challenging sections that are in this route. So with that being said, we're already 3 minutes into the video and we got like 30 minutes of description. We haven't even got started. Let's get into the route. Okay, so when you pull out of Lake City, you pretty much get on the Alpine Loop right away. So once we kind of pulled off the main road out of Lake City, we kind of met as a group here, and you get on this really big, fast dirt road that kind of heads you back towards the Alpine Loop area. And actually, this part, Dwight and I were joking because we were talking about how much like dust we had accumulated from the day before. So if you haven't seen section 3, we'll talk about that. Like we were joking about like, yeah, my helmet still smells like just absolute dust. Like I feel like I'm just breathing dust. And as you can see here, still kicking up a lot of dust. You roll by Lake San Cristobal, which is actually super pretty. Again, I think one of the best things, I'm going to mention this a bunch, but one of the best things of this route is just the landscapes and the beauty of this part of Colorado. I don't think you're going to get scenery like this anywhere else in the world. I've been to Alaska, and the mountain ranges are not like this either. It's just very unique to this area. Right out of the gate, as soon as you come up to the lake, you have incredible views. Once you pass the lake, you kind of get in and you see what you're heading to, and you see like just the incredible landscape that you're going to be riding over, and it's just amazing views. And this road, big road, kind of lasts for quite a while, so you're cooking. Like it's pretty easy. It's very similar to the day before where it's big and fast. Then it starts to narrow out as you get further back. Before you actually start to climb up Cinnamon Pass, it does get a lot tighter and narrower, and it gives you a taste of the imminent death. So here you can see, like this is a start of it, and it pretty much never ends. Like I think the hardest thing about this section of the route is this, like there's this fear of like dropping off the side of a cliff down like 200 or 300 feet to your death, right? Like if you fall off these things at speed, it's not going to be fun. And there's just a lot of exposure throughout this entire section. Again, so like here as you come into the trees, it's not as bad because like if something happens, you're like, you got a tree there to hold you. But here, look, I didn't even look over the side. It looks like it's at least a few hundred feet down into the valley floor, and that just makes it a lot more intimidating. Now this section of road is pretty easy, and it's flat, it's not steep, you are slowly climbing up, but there's nothing hard about it. So it's just like staying to one side, keeping your speed under control, and kind of cruising. But it's like this for a while, and so it gives you a taste of like what the rest of your day is going to be like. And also one thing to note is that like this section, it just doesn't let up, except for the only break you would have is between Corkscrew Pass and Ophir Pass, because you'll get onto the $1 Million Highway for short sections. So between those two passes, you would have a break. For us, actually, we took a longer break, and we went after Corkscrew. We went down into the town of Ouray, and we had lunch, and then we came back up. So we actually had a little bit of a longer break before doing Ophir, which may not be bad. And here you can see the road kind of starts to feel like a Cumberland Pass feel. So if you haven't seen the previous day's video, I talk a lot about this, just like a lot of sharp embedded rock, not very loose at this point, but just kind of rattles your teeth to death, like your molars want to fall out. It's kind of like that for a ways, pretty much all the way up until from here. Once it starts kind of rattling, it kind of stays this way all the way to the end. Actually, I take that back. Now that I think about it, as you get closer to Corkscrew, where you climb up, Corkscrew, the dirt is quite a bit different there. You can see Red Mountain, it gets very red, and it's a bit more sandy. And so the landscape there does change a bit. But it's like this for quite a ways. And here I try to take like the mountain bike line, as I said. We'll see this again later on. And what I mean by that is a lot of times when you're on a mountain bike, and I think the same thing I've learned also applies to a motorcycle, is you'll see big rocks, and a lot of times it's easier to roll those big rocks than it is to stay straight. Now here's the actual entrance to Cinnamon Pass. So you actually want to go right. You can see all the guys here are heading up right into Cinnamon Pass. And now a little foreshadowing, if you missed it in the intro part of this video, this is the first corner where I dropped the bike. Again, it was not anything super hard. It's just I went too far to the inside. And actually, if you watch this section, I think I included it here, you can kind of see everybody goes up and they stay wide to the left. So they stay hard left. And by staying left, it makes it a lot easier. As you see, I'm coming in way too tight on the right to try to avoid the stuff on the outside. But I needed to stay hard left here. And instead, I went into the middle, and it just real chunky with a lot of sharp rocks, stalled the bike, and it went over. I think this also, though, dropping the bike that early into kind of the first pass, it kind of set the tone for my mental state for the rest of the ride. And I think that had a big impact. I may not have thought about that until later, until I had time to reflect. But when you drop the bike and you haven't dropped it the entire rest of the ride, and you were gaining confidence, and then all of a sudden you drop the bike, for me, it kind of like took me off a cliff a little bit, right, mentally, and it put me in a different mental state, which I think had a bigger impact and was the reason why I had some other mistakes and I dropped the bike later, because I kind of lost that confidence in my ability. And I had been building a lot of confidence over the previous 3 days because I was riding better, the bike was feeling better, things were going smoother, and it kind of killed my mojo. Now, a lot of the corners here are just, if you take them kind of slow coming in and then kind of gas it through, pretty easy. Nothing too hard, actually. So climbing up Cinnamon was pretty easy. This one was a little bit tough. You kind of had to shoot the gap in the middle. You could have gone far wide to the outside and kind of taken the mountain bike line, but at that point, Dwight was not wrecked, but he had stalled out there. So it gave me some time to position the bike and just kind of shoot that gap. Again here, just more kind of tight, slow corners, but once you get around, if you kind of rip them, nothing too technical. That first one is probably the hardest because the middle section is just complete junk. It's just a lot of big, sharp rocks that without a lot of momentum, you're going to get hung up on. And that was my case. I got hung up and it stalled the bike. And then I went to put my foot down. There's just nowhere to go. But as you cruise up, just look at these views. Every time you're in the San Juan Mountains for me, you get to a spot and you're like, can it get any better? And then it does, and it gets better. And the views are just absolutely incredible. Here it's a little loose, but not so bad. Getting to the top, I didn't have any problems on any of the climbs, to be honest with you. So climbing the bike was pretty easy. Here we stopped as a group just to kind of, right before we got to the summit, as just a cool overlook to look over this other side and kind of bring the group together. But again, the views are just absolutely amazing. Now here, you're almost to the top, and you can see that the risk factor kind of goes down, right? Because on the left-hand side, it just doesn't drop off as steep. It's a little bit more mild, so if you do wreck, it's not going to be as bad. You probably even get your bike out of that. And then, so now when I get here, I'm feeling pretty good. I'm like, okay, got to the top, no other problems, made all the switchbacks. The rest of this should be a breeze. I didn't realize that I'd have a lot of struggle going down Corkscrew and how hard going down Ophir would be. To this day, going down Ophir is tough. I should go practice it. It's not that far from my house. I should go ride it, but it was like a serious workout getting down there, and it was the end of the day. So maybe if I were to drive down there in the morning and hit it fresh early, it wouldn't be so bad. But even going down the backside of Cinnamon here, not super steep. So Cinnamon, I think either direction would be fun. It's not so steep and loose that you're terrified. However, one of our guys, Don, he did go down here. So for us on that day, on the left side, there's just a lot of big loose rock. You can kind of see me working my way through them here. And if you get into those and you lock that front tire up, you're immediately losing traction. And then here you can see I go down the second time because I get into that loose rock and I'm trying to stop and I can't, and the bike just goes sideways. And again, like looking back on this, probably my fault because Mike had no idea I was coming. He was just trying to get into really the only lane possible that we could maintain some decent traction. And had I honked my horn or something, it would have given him the opportunity to stop. But maybe if I would have honked his horn, I would have scared him and he would have wrecked. So yeah, that's probably my fault. I should have probably waited for him, but it was just bad timing. Now coming down the backside of Cinnamon, again, not super steep, not too terrible. I mean, it looks like here I'm holding 13 to 14 miles an hour. Again, the problem with the Tiger is there's no engine braking until you get close to 20 miles an hour. I think it's like 17 to 20 miles an hour. I don't have the skill set to ride these hills that fast. I'm not Chris Birch. Like, I'm sure he can, ride these at 35 miles an hour, 40 miles an hour. I don't have that kind of skill set. So here we're starting to work our way down into Animas Forks. This section was probably the more rough section, but I was actually still having fun trying to get my mojo back, taking the mountain bike line, actually coming up over this section right about here. I was like, oh, there's a big drop. How am I going to navigate this out? And I kind of had to be smart and find a line that was rollable out because I didn't want to do any drops into loose and then cliffside. And then you can see we actually run into a bit of trail maintenance. So the hard thing about these passes is, like you can see here, they're out there with these this big machinery trying to maintain these roads. It is very, very popular out there. We saw a lot of Jeeps, a lot of trucks, a lot of side-by-sides. So they're out there maintaining it. So you may get it in great condition or you may get it in absolute terrible condition. Here, as we rolled up and we're almost to Animas Forks, Don was just in so much pain from wrecking earlier, he ended up blacking out on the bike. Good thing that one of our guys was there to catch him. Actually, two guys, John and Guy, they were there to kind of catch him. Kind of a scary moment because he was out for probably a good 30 seconds, which it felt like forever, to be honest with you. And so you're really worried and you're kind of back there. From here, it's an easy hour and a half just to Silverton, and there's nothing in Silverton. So to get to Ouray is a bit of was kind of where we needed to go. So it was a little bit scary. So I think this also played into it because coming into Animas Forks, I then rode down because the rest of the group was ahead of us. And so I was running down to go tell them essentially what was going on with Don, how he was feeling, how we needed to figure out a plan to get him out. Like, he probably shouldn't be riding his bike. And so we ended up spending a lot of time in Animas Forks. And whenever you do endurance sports or that sort of thing, a lot of times it's fighting attrition, and being faster is better because you're not out as long, right? And spending a lot of time here also adds a lot of fatigue. You're at altitude, you're in the sun, and it just makes it harder. So I think this also kind of compounded to the struggles I had later on as we get into California and Corkscrew and Ophir Pass, was just being out for so long, at altitude, it's tiring. So here now we're climbing up the backside of California, and as you can see, kind of right out of the gate, pretty loose, almost like Ophir loose. However, these rocks are a bit more like river rock style, so they're a bit more rounded. They weren't like these really light, flat, kind of like tile-ish rocks. And actually this super rough stuff, it didn't last too long. And actually, it was just kind of that initial section. So if you can get through that, you might be a little nervous. If you're coming the other way, you'll come off the pass and you're basically at the bottom and you can see the bottom. So it probably adds a layer of I'm here, nothing to worry about. But as you can see, a lot of stock Jeeps drive up these roads. So that's another thing. Going back and looking at this, in my mind after that day, I was like, this was the gnarliest thing I've ever ridden. It was so hard. But really, it was just the downhills. These uphill sections I had no problems on. People are driving stock Jeeps up there, so obviously it's not that technical of a route because like a stock Jeep can handle it. But when you're on a motorcycle, it just kind of compounds it. It does get a little bit more technical here as you get about, I don't know, halfway up. Some more big rocks, like looking for the mountain bike line, just kind of trying to make it a little bit more smooth. But again, just like look at the views. I mean, you're kind of back here in this cool valley. I mean, it's just absolutely amazing. And I think that's why I don't want to discourage anybody from like my wrap-up video, and I hope you stayed this long, because the views are amazing. It is probably the best part of Colorado is this section of the mountains, and I think if you've never been there, you should definitely check it out. So here I was like stopped and I was actually talking to Chip. Before, when they had run this route, there, as you can see where the road ends up there, there's a kind of a hard right-hand turn. It was really tough for them with other groups before, so they had to like actually almost nobody made the corner, and so he was trying to guide me through the corner. But as you'll see, as we come up into the corner here, as we make our way back, they had cleaned it up. So that's one of the things about the Alpine Loop area, is that you really don't know like what kind of condition the road is going to be in. Is it going to be in great condition, or is it going to be in terrible condition? You just don't know, and that's what makes it hard. So you could watch this video and get an idea of how great the road is. You could come out and it could be way easier, and like all this loose stuff could be cleaned up, or you could come out and it could be worse. A couple of these sections, like the downhill section on Corkscrew and the downhill section on Ophir, Chip and our guide Ash said like this is the worst they've ever seen it, and they ride this every year. They do this route every year. I think this is like their 6th or 7th time going over the Colorado BDR, and this was the worst that they've seen it. So again, for you, you know, if 1 out of 6 times it was really bad for them, for you it might be really easy, and it may not be that bad. Here, as you get to the top of California Pass, again, amazing views, but you're at this like sharp mountain peak. So there's just like, isn't a whole lot of parking area. Ironically, like I live in Colorado, I'm pretty good with altitude, but I actually was getting a headache. So just keep in mind that you're a little over 13,000 feet here. So if you're not good with altitude, once I got some more water in me, it definitely helped. But yeah, you're at 12,960. So just shy of 13,000 feet. So definitely be aware of it. If you struggle with altitude, keep that in mind. And here is where the bike goes down again. And I think this whole section was, again, just about like the super sharp, imminent death drop off. And I was like trying to maintain to stay to the inside, getting too much speed, locked up the rear tire, which stalled the bike. And then I had no traction, and then I dumped the bike. And as you can see here, like coming down the backside of California, it is just super steep and super loose. And so in order to maintain this like 10 or 11 miles an hour, I basically, on the Tiger 900, you basically have to ride the brakes. You cannot, there's no engine braking until you're close to 20 miles an hour. Now I did take out some other bikes, and I actually like took my Honda 450 RL out, which is just a single cylinder. And the way that bike is geared, I went and did a really steep hill here, no brakes. It held me at like 8 miles an hour with my weight. So just the gearing and maybe the nature of that triple. We'll see later on that there are some guys on 1250s, and it seems like with that motor and those big bikes, they just kind of tractored through everything. Like climbing up this, I tried to keep distance because it was just, the Tiger did far better at speed. There were some sections where, like I think actually climbing up to the top of California, it was way easier if I held close to 30 miles an hour. So like doing 27, 28 miles an hour. So going down, it probably would have been better. The bike probably would have been more stable, but not trusting that you're going to be able to stop the bike and having all these sharp corners just made it really tough. I think this is actually Hurricane Pass here. So when I was mentioning earlier in my other, and I had to make those edits, so I was talking about California, I think this is technically the summit of Hurricane Pass. And then you come down, Hurricane Pass wasn't so bad. It was kind of rocky, but it wasn't so steep that it was hard to just maintain and get down, and it wasn't very long. So that's the thing we'll see about Corkscrew. So going down, so going north to south through this route, going down Corkscrew is just really long. This section here, you can see it's really loose, but there's 2 tracks, so you can kind of pick your line and you can kind of avoid the loose rock. But you can see if you get in that loose rock, you're not stopping. So that's what's hard. And that's what's kind of scary about this route, is just the amount of large loose rock and how hard it is to control the bike going down these sections. but it's not very long. It's just like that one steep section, and then it's pretty mellow all the way over to Corkscrew. So this really wasn't so bad. Even some big fun rock sections here, and I actually enjoy these big rock sections more than this 2-track separated by like just a bunch of loose garbage, to be honest with you. So I would much rather do the big rock stuff. But again, if you look, you can start to see Iron Mountain or Red Mountain there in the background. The views are just absolutely incredible. I mean, it looks like one of those like sand things that you turn upside down and the sand creates the mountain shapes, but it's just natural. And we even had a little bit of, if you're not into photography, quick tip is that like generally the scenery is way better if you have some clouds in the sky rather than just a blue sky, because it just adds texture and some intrigue into the image. And you can tell like we had this beautiful partly cloudy day with just this amazing scenery. And so again, this section is very hard, but I would recommend you do it. Even if you are new, for me, I would practice the downhills because it was just the hardest. So now we're coming up to the Corkscrew entrance. This climb, and I think if you stay left here, you can bail out. So I think this is a bailout point here if you don't want to do Corkscrew, if you want to go around, because we were checking as a group, like, is everybody ready to do Corkscrew? And I had it in my mind, even though I had dropped the bike twice at this point, that I was like, or three times at this point, because I dropped it at the top, the first corner, then I dropped it when I got pushed off the road there, going down Cinnamon, and then I dropped it at the top of California. But I was like, I'm going to do this, I'm committed to it. So I was like trying to change that mental state. But when you kind of have it in your mind that like you're getting beat up and it's hard, that was a tough thing for me to overcome mentally. And I think it would have had a big impact if I didn't have that first drop. Probably wouldn't have had the second drop. And then the second drop was out of my control. So maybe that one would have got me, but who knows? It's hard to say, right? Like hindsight's always 20/20. But this climb, it is kind of a lot more like mildly softer with a lot of like looser kind of grippy sand, if that makes sense. Almost like playground style sand. Not that like marbly stuff, more like kind of beach sand, I guess. It was finer. But there's some really tight switchbacks, but nothing super hard. You can see here it's a little bit sandy, a little bit loose, but just come in, rip some gas, and you can get through. So even though Corkscrew has a lot of tight switchbacks, the switchbacks didn't give me any problems. It was just the super steep descents that we're going to see here coming up on the backside. Also, as you can tell by the camera lens here, it gets super, super dusty. Just like the day before, really dusty. But once you get up here, you can actually see like there are a bunch of Jeeps. I mean, look, there's a stock like 1990s Grand Cherokee that had driven up there. So it's nothing that is like technically challenging as far as like big rocks or like in Ophir Pass in Colorado, where there's like this one section that's this really big rock and big consequences. Here you can see this is the start of it. So it is just like a sheer drop to one side. You can see again, it's the 2-track. Now looking at this section, I don't think I struggled as much here, because again, it was like you had kind of 2 tracks to follow in, and you can get decent amount of traction in the one, because it's not a lot of big loose rock that if you use any front brake, your front wheel's gonna want to wash out, right? So I think these sections weren't so bad. Coming down around a couple of other bends, we'll see like things get pretty loose and a bit scary, because you can see here it's a lot of this loose stuff. And so if you do too much brake, you start to slide out and lose traction, and the bike wants to go sideways. So if you do it and there are basically 2 tracks, you should be fine. Like now looking back at it, and I was also worried about like blowing the brakes up, but talking with the mechanics over at the Triumph dealer, they're like, no man, you can ride the heck out of those brakes before they would give way. So I was like really worried about getting the brakes way too hot, because I'm basically having to use the brakes the entire way. And this downhill had to be 6 or 7 miles, I'm guessing. Like it was long, it was far, and it was just a lot of super steep sections. Now here's where I start losing control, aka Code Brown. You can see like that back end is starting to slide out, much like that happened to me on Hurricane. And I kind of let it go, and I had to just gain speed. And at this point too, I had also made another mistake. So there is a trick where you can, if like on super steep stuff like this, you can turn the bike off. I actually had to stop here and kind of take a breath and like recompose myself. But on this super steep stuff, what you can do is you can also turn the bike off, but it's important to dump the bike into like third gear. And then you can use the clutch as a brake. So the more you let the clutch out, the more braking power you have, because that clutch is grabbing, right? And because it's a wet clutch, it should be okay. You shouldn't burn your clutch out. And I was like concerned about that, but both Ash and Chip said it wouldn't be a problem. But you have to be in third gear, because if you're in first gear, it's too high and it'll start to turn the motor, and it'll want to kick the motor on, and it will lock up the rear wheel really quickly. So you need a taller gear. And my problem here is I was trying that technique, but I was in first gear. And so it was like locking the rear wheel up too much, and it wasn't giving me the kind of more room to be able to play with and find that sweet spot. So when you're in a taller gear like third gear, you have a lot of room in the clutch to be able to find that sweet spot to hold you at whatever mile per hour you're comfortable with. And if you want to go faster, you just pull the clutch in. If you want to go slower, slowly let it out and kind of find that sweet spot. I ended up using this technique again later. This area probably, especially that section up there where I almost wrecked, probably not the best place to try out a new technique, you know, if I'm honest. But at this point, I was just so tired. I had no engine braking to help me that I needed something. As you can see here, that essentially we're going to pass about 1 million Jeeps. Well, one 4Runner and about 1 million Jeeps, which is a bit ironic. I guess there's a Hummer here too. But as you can see, there's a lot of traffic. So these roads in this section get a lot of use. So it's kind of hit or miss as to like what kind of condition they're going to be in. But you can see, like, as far as a backcountry road goes, relatively smooth. It is just the degree of steepness, which the GoPro effect doesn't really help. It doesn't help you to understand like how steep it is. And also just the loose sections, and trying to make sure you can find a spot where when you pull the brakes, the bike actually has enough traction to stop, which is tough. And it kind of just never ends. This is, I think, here, this kind of gives you a good view of like how just steep it is. And here I was getting a little bit more comfortable, and now I'm going like 17 miles an hour or so into a bend. But it's just so steep and it never ends. That's what the hardest thing with Corkscrew is. Now, if you do it the traditional way and you climb up this section, I think it would be far better, because it's not like if you can get in one of those tracks, it's not like you're going to lose a lot of traction trying to go up, and so much easier to maintain, to gain, give yourself speed rather than trying to take speed away on like a 45-degree slope. And then down here, there's like this little whoopty section, which was pretty fun. And I probably could have gone faster through these sections, but I was just so tired. And at this point, like, worried I was going to come around another bend and it was just going to be another super steep, like 45-degree drop. And I was going to have to like get back on the brakes. But finally, getting to the bottom, I felt like the group had waited for me, because I was like the last one coming up. I felt like they waited for me forever. I felt like I was super slow. They actually said they had just gotten there. So, but as you can see, like, look at the bike next to me. That was a 1250 GS Adventure. So it's like the biggest GS, and he had no problems. But I think it goes back to that, just the torque on that Boxster engine and being able to just like let out first gear. Here we're starting to climb up Ophir. Again, the climb or descent from the $1 Million Highway to the top of Ophir, not that exciting. I didn't really include too many clips here because it's kind of a lot of the same as of like the day before. I do want to give you like a decent amount of footage so you can get an idea of the route, but just kind of a lot of the same. A little bit of that like kind of chattery feeling. It gets a little bit more chattery as you get to the top, but nothing overly complicated getting up here. And so having gone over, over Cinnamon, down California, and down Corkscrew, I was like, oh, Ophir will be fine. The scree field that everybody talks about will be, 100 yards. I'll get through that, and then it'll be fine. And actually, everybody talks about that with Ophir. Like, Ophir is not that technical of a pass. It is just the scree field that's really, really hard. And for us, again, our two guides, Ash and Chip, said that this was like the worst that they've seen it. Like, it was in the worst conditions. So it's like, and we were going down. So it was just like a combination of the both for me. Like, I struggled on the loose downhill,
And the loose downhills were probably in the worst condition they've been. So I kind of got the best of both worlds for my limited skill set. Super glad I did it in hindsight. I should go back and do them again. But yeah, it is what it is. So here we are climbing up. And you can see like those big BMWs, I mean, that GS is just tractoring through this. So if you have a full-size adventure bike and you're okay in the steep loose, that's your biggest challenge on these routes. Like nothing in this section, which is the hardest section of the BDR, is like very technical. So as long as you're okay, for me, on a big bike, the only question would be like, can I handle that big bike on the steep, loose sections? If you're good with that and you feel comfortable on the downhill in the steep loose, you'll be fine with a full-size adventure bike. I mean, and these routes were like built for GSs, right? Like people carrying full luggage, and we weren't even carrying full luggage. But then we get to the top here, and you can see this is like, you can see on both sides, like giving you a little bit of a hint as to what's about to come up on the other side. So here you're just shy of 12,000 feet, but it is, you can see all that rock. And now we're about to ride through it. So this is where things got rough. So right before this, actually I was coming down, I was like telling myself, I'm gonna crush this, I'm not gonna have any problems. And my front wheel washed, and then I whiskey throttled it. So basically, if you've never had that happen, when your front wheel moves, it like twists your wrist, right? And so then you gas. And I ended up dumping the bike for the 4th time right up there. And I was right at the top, and it was just like a weird incident. But again, it was like in my mind, because I'm like, oh, I'm gonna do good on this. Here is when I actually used the technique properly. So I had the bike in like 3rd gear, and I was just basically using the clutch. I was sitting down to walking through this. Honestly, the better way to do it would be to stand up and to let the bike bounce under you. But I was just like so tired and so beat that I wanted to try to like at least use my feet to help walk it through these sections. Again, the GoPro effect doesn't really help. I mean, even to right here, I even made a comment. I was like, oh my God, I'm so tired. And it's like 5 o'clock at this point, 4:30, 5 o'clock, and we left at 8 o'clock. So it's like we've been out on the bike all day, and you're now on your 4th technical pass in this loose steep stuff. But you can see here, like it is not mellow. Like it's decently steep. This section right here, actually, not so bad, Again, I'm just using the clutch to maintain like 6-7 miles an hour to where like I don't feel like the bike is out of control. Now, technically speaking, going closer to like 10 to 12 miles an hour, probably twice as fast as I was going, would have made like this section much easier because the bike could carry some speed through it. Just like going uphill. Like I talked about when I was going through the loose stuff, I had to give myself some distance because everybody was kind of, the guys in front of me were kind of tractoring. And if I could carry like 20, 25 miles an hour, just smoothed all that out and I went right up it. And the same is true going down. The problem for me and what I need to figure out is just like building confidence in my steep downhill braking. So when I come to sections like this, I can carry enough speed to get through it, but know that on the other side, I have the skills actually to be able to stop the bike and I'm not going to like lose control like I did when I had that Code Brown moment coming down the backside of Corkscrew. But it's just relenting. Like you can see, I mean, it is deep and loose, and you can just see it's basically like somebody shattered a bunch of tiles. Like not super heavy rock, very thin, and so when you hit it, it just kind of bounces all over and it just like deflects you everywhere. And I'm trying to hold basically to the right side because it's imminent death on the other side, like we talked about, right? Like this exposure stuff just never ends on this section here. And so I'm just trying to hold one side. At this point, I was just so tired. It looks like it's not that hard, but it is like, it was such a workout getting the bike through there. Again, it probably would be far easier if I carried some more speed, right? If I carried more speed through here, the bike would have tracked better. But as you can see here, I'm about to almost go for my 5th wreck, but 5th drop, but I save it. And I was so tired. But at this point, I was like, I am not dropping the bike again. I don't care how tired I am. I'm going to make sure this thing does not fall over. And I remember sitting here like thinking to myself, oh my God, I'm so tired. When will this be over? And then it actually gets a little bit better. So this section, it looks kind of scary, but actually it was better. It was a little bit flatter. Now I'm going 10, 12 miles an hour, which I probably should have been doing at the top. But again, once you get through that scree field, you can see here, like, kind of a nothing burger, right? Like, everybody's waiting on me again because I kept dropping my bike and I was going super slow through that stuff. Actually, even one of the guys on the GS, he was like, yeah, that's the hardest thing I've ever ridden this bike through. That was by far one of the harder things he's ever done. So like Ophir Pass, it is that 2-mile section. The rest of the pass, as you can see here and on the way up, like it literally is a nothing burger. It is super easy. It is that 2-mile section that is just an absolute beatdown. And I don't know why. I mean, the snow must carry, I mean, the snow obviously melts and carries all that stuff down. So like it would be nice if those tractors would go up there like once a week and just like scrape all that stuff off, because it wouldn't fall unless there's like a heavy rainstorm, so it might be easier to maintain. But I don't know. I don't maintain these roads. I don't know what the plan is. But as you can see here, you kind of get to the end. So thanks for sticking along. If you've made it, we are now almost 40 minutes into just the route description. So if you definitely made it this far, subscribe, leave a comment below. Tell me how much I suck at riding bikes, or whatever mean comment you want to leave below. Just leave those below. Hit the notification bell. I hope this video is helpful. I did the Colorado BDR. That's it. We'll do some other wrap-up videos on gear and whatnot. So some other stuff to come on the BDR. If you're new and you're thinking about doing one, some tips now that I've learned about things, what I might do differently as far as like gear-wise goes. But until then, stay safe out there.